They say blood is thicker than water, a bond that can't be broken, a tie that pulls you back no matter how far you drift. But what if that blood is tainted? What if the water is a suffocating current, dragging you down rather than lifting you up? I learned early on that some ties are meant to be severed, no matter how much they bleed when cut. And some wounds, they never truly heal. They just harden into scars, reminding you of the damage, fueling a different kind of strength. A cold, hard strength. I was 12, just 12 years old, a child, really, still believing in fairy tales, in the unconditional love of family, in the idea that my home was my sanctuary. That day, the sanctuary became a battlefield, not with shouts or screams, not with flying fists, but with cold, calculated words that slice deeper than any blade. Words delivered with a chilling finality that still echoes in the quiet corners of my mind. Even now, all these years later, you are no longer welcome here. That's what they said. My mother, my father, my older brother, my aunts, uncles, grandparents, every single one of them standing in a circle, their faces a blur of condemnation, their eyes devoid of the warmth I had desperately craved my entire life. The reason? It was something so trivial, so insignificant in the grand scheme of things, that even now, recalling it makes my stomach clench with a bitter, humorless laugh. A misunderstanding, a broken vase, an accusation, a lie. It didn't matter. What mattered was their choice, their collective, unwavering decision to cast out their own flesh and blood, to choose a flimsy, porcelain ornament over their child. I stood there, a small, trembling figure, clutching a worn teddy bear, my world crumbling around me. My meager belongings, shoved into a single, tattered backpack, sat beside me like a silent indictment. They watched as I was led out the door, not one hand reaching out, not one voice whispering a word of comfort, just silence, and the chilling click of the lock turning behind me, the sound of my childhood ending, the sound of a new, desolate beginning. I remember the bite of the evening air on my skin, the unfamiliar chill seeping into my bones. The streetlights seemed to mock me, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with my fear. Where do you go when you're 12 and suddenly homeless? When the people who are supposed to protect you, cherish you, have thrown you away like yesterday's trash? I walked 4 hours, days. It felt like each step taking me further from the life I knew, further from the betrayal, further into an uncertain abyss. The hunger gnawed at me, the cold bit, and the loneliness was a suffocating blanket. But beneath it all, a tiny ember of something else began to glow, something hot and fierce, something that whispered, "They will regret this." That ember. It was the genesis of everything that followed. It was the promise I made to myself under a cold, indifferent sky. A promise that I would not just survive, but thrive. A promise that I would build a life so far beyond their petty imaginations, so utterly out of their reach, that they would never again have the power to hurt me. And then, I would make them see what they had lost. I would make them feel a fraction of the pain they had inflicted. I would make them beg. The years that followed were a blur of struggle and resilience. Shelters, odd jobs, the kindness of strangers, the cruelty of others. I learned to be invisible, to be resourceful, to trust no one entirely. Education was my escape, my weapon. I devoured books, absorbed knowledge, honed my skills. Every late night spent studying, every extra shift worked, every sacrifice made, was a brick in the wall I was building. A wall not just around my heart, but around my future. A fortress designed to keep out the ghosts of my past and to protect the powerful. Cold resolve that had become my closest companion. I didn't forget them. Not for a single day. Their faces, their words, the feeling of utter abandonment. It was a constant, simmering fuel beneath the surface of my determined calm. I used it. I channeled it. I transmuted their cruelty into my ambition. My journey took me far from the desolate street. Geographically, yes, across continents, into different cultures. But more importantly, it took me worlds away from the scared, discarded child I once was. I built an empire, brick by painstaking brick. Not an empire of land or armies, but of innovation, of ideas, of influence. I became someone they could never have imagined, someone they would never have recognized, and precisely because of that, someone they would desperately need. The irony was not lost on me. Every success, every accolade, every milestone achieved was a silent victory against the shadows of my past. It was a step closer to the inevitable reckoning. The first hint of their desperation came subtly. A ripple in the calm surface of my carefully constructed life. An email from an address I hadn't seen in years. An old family name, barely recognized. It landed in my inbox like a misplaced artifact from a forgotten era. I almost deleted it. Almost. But the ember, that tiny spark from my childhood, had grown into a controlled blaze, and it demanded to be fed. The subject line was innocuous enough. Family matter. I opened it, and there it was. A carefully worded plea, wrapped in layers of false politeness and veiled urgency. A plea from my estranged aunt, mentioning a difficult situation and unforeseen circumstances that had befallen the family. No apology, no acknowledgement of the past, just a thinly disguised request for help. My lips curved into a slow, chilling smile. The game, it seemed, had begun. I didn't respond immediately. Oh no, that would have been too easy, too quick. My revenge wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon, carefully planned and meticulously executed over years. I let their emails sit there, a digital testament to their failing fortunes, for days, then weeks. I imagined their growing anxiety, their frustrated whispers, their dawning realization that the lifeline they had casually tossed out might not be grabbed. I wanted them to stew. I wanted them to truly feel the weight of their current predicament. Before I even deigned to acknowledge their existence, it was a small act, a minor cruelty, but it was a necessary prelude, a taste of what was to come. When I finally replied, it was brief, clinical, emotionless. I no longer recognize this name. Please clarify the nature of your correspondence. I signed it with my adopted professional name, the name I had forged in the crucible of my independence, the name that was now synonymous with success, with power, with a life they could only dream of. The reply came back within hours. This time, less polite, more frantic. The words family and crisis were thrown around with increasing abandon. It was becoming clear. Their carefully constructed facade was cracking, and I was enjoying every single fracture. The next email was from my brother, my older brother, the one who had stood silently by, his eyes hard and his jaw set. As they led me out the door, his words were different, more direct, more desperate. It's Mom. She's very sick. We can't afford the treatments. Please, we need your help. We heard you did well for yourself. No, I'm sorry. No, I was wrong. Just a transactional plea. It was so transparent, so utterly devoid of genuine feeling, that it almost made me laugh. My mother, the one who had stood at the front of the pack, her expression like stone. The very thought of her suffering should have been a source of satisfaction. But all I felt was a cold emptiness. The hurt was too deep for simple satisfaction. The only thing that mattered now was control. They had no idea who they were dealing with now. The naive, heartbroken child was gone. In her place was a person who understood the true value of things. Not money, not family names. The true value was in power, in leverage. I didn't respond for 3 more days. I let the silence hang in the air, thick with their anxiety. I wanted them to picture me, sitting in my luxurious home, surrounded by everything I had earned, contemplating their fate. I wanted them to feel the helplessness, the lack of control, the exact same feeling they had so casually thrust upon me all those years ago. When I finally sent my response, it was not to my brother, but to my legal team. The email was simple: initiate contact with my family's representatives. I'm prepared to discuss a potential loan with a strict and binding contract. A loan, not a gift. A contract, not an act of charity. This was business. And they were about to learn that in my world, there were no free passes, no second chances, and certainly no unconditional love. I knew what they would be forced to sign. The terms would be brutal, legally airtight, and completely in my favor. It would tie their futures to my will, giving me the ultimate authority over their lives. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the power. The power to stand tall, not just as a survivor, but as a force to be reckoned with. The power to look at the people who had abandoned me and say, "You need me now. You need the person you threw away." And they would have no choice but to accept it, because the truth is, while they cast me out at 12, I had simply been building a different kind of home. A home where I was the king, where my word was law, and where the past was not forgotten, but carefully, and with chilling precision, avenged. The sound of their begging was the only music I truly cared to hear. It was the sound of a debt being paid. And for the first time, in a very long time, I finally felt at peace.